The Capitol hearing room was bursting at the seams. Every seat in the gallery was taken. Staffers, reporters, lobbyists, and members of the public squeezed shoulder to shoulder, their eyes fixed on the witness table at the center. The air carried a strange blend of perfumed coffee and the faint metallic tang of camera equipment warming under the lights. Overhead, rows of bright, unforgiving studio lights blazed down. They turned the polished wood of the desks into amber and made the marble walls gleam. Every wrinkle, every twitch, every bead of sweat would be visible in high definition to millions of viewers across the country. Cameras slid along their tracks like predators circling prey, their red tally lights blinking as they shifted focus from one target to another. Every click of a zoom lens sounded louder than it should, as if the room itself was aware of what was at stake. The low murmur of conversation rippled through the chamber, reporters whispering about polling numbers, staffers exchanging nervous predictions, and a handful of spectators debating what they thought might happen. But beneath the polite shuffling and soft voices, there was a pressure in the air. It was the kind of tension that didn't need to be announced. You could feel it in your bones. It was the sense that one wrong sentence could blow the lid off everything that history might be written in the next few minutes. And at the center of that coiled tension sat two women. On one side of the long wooden table, Jasmine Crockett measured, composed and deliberate. She sat with her back, perfectly straight, hands folded on the desk in front of her. Her suit was a deep, commanding shade of navy, the fabric crisp, her hair pulled back neatly. But it was her eyes that drew attention, steady, unwavering, locked in focus, as if she were looking straight through the noise, straight into the heart of the moment. Across from her, framed by the softest, most flattering light the room could offer, sat former First Lady Melania Trump. Her tailored white suit was immaculate, almost glowing under the camera lights. Every movement, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers rested lightly on the tabletop, looked deliberate, rehearsed. She carried the calm poise of someone used to being watched, studied, and photographed. Every glance, every quiet inhale, every second was building towards something. The people in the room didn't know exactly what it was, but they could feel it. Something was coming, and it would not be small. Melania sat poised, the pristine white of her suit almost too bright under the overhead lights. Every line of the jacket was flawless, every crease sharp, as if the fabric itself had been trained for this moment. Her posture was textbook, perfect shoulders, back, chin, lifted just enough to project confidence without arrogance. The cameras loved her. They always had. She knew exactly how to give them what they wanted, an image of elegance and control. Across the table, Jasmine was the visual opposite. She wore a deep charcoal gray suit, the kind of color that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her face composed, but her eyes told a different story. There was no warmth in them, now only focus. They were sharp, unwavering, the kind of stare that could strip away a person's polished surface and search for the truth underneath. Not a single word passed between them. No greeting, no polite acknowledgement, just silence, heavy, deliberate, and charged with meaning. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start to hear your own heartbeat. Melania's fingers rested lightly on the table, the nails manicured to a soft sheen. Jasmine's hands stayed clasped together, perfectly still, as if she were conserving her energy for a single decisive move. Around them, the shuffle of papers and the faint hum of cameras felt miles away. It was no longer just a hearing. It was a standoff, and both women knew it. The stillness broke with 5 words. Melania didn't lean forward. She didn't raise her voice. She simply turned her head, fixed her gaze on Jasmine, and let the sentence fall with surgical precision. "You are unfit to speak for America's children." Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but the weight behind it was anything but. The words carried the kind of cold finality that's meant to cut deeper than shouting ever could. For a fraction of a second, the room seemed to lose its sound. Pens stopped scratching. A cough halfway across the gallery was cut short. Even the faint hum of the cameras felt muted, as though the air itself had frozen to hold the moment in place. The impact was immediate. Reporters in the press row glanced at one another, wide-eyed, already calculating the headline. In the corners of the room, staffers exchanged quick, nervous looks. Out in the digital world where nothing waited for context, the phrase hit like a flare in the dark. On Twitter, the hashtag #UNFIT bloomed instantly, spreading from political accounts to gossip blogs within seconds. Screens lit up across the country as people clipped the moment, rewinding it. replaying it, dissecting it frame by frame. Melania leaned back ever so slightly as if satisfied with the strike she just delivered. Jasmine, however, didn't move. Her posture didn't shift. Her expression didn't falter. She simply held the silence, letting it stretch long enough for everyone in the room and millions watching at home to wonder what her response would be. Jasmine's hands moved not much, just enough to break the still frame she'd been holding since Melania's words landed. Her fingers brushed the edge of a slim, dark folder lying flat on the table in front of her. The leather cover was unmarked, plain, almost forgettable to anyone who didn't know better. But Jasmine knew, and in that quiet touch, there was purpose. The cameras caught it instantly, that subtle movement, the way her fingertips lingered on the folder for half a beat longer than necessary. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens without even realizing it. Something about that simple gesture hinted that she wasn't here just to defend herself. She was here to deliver something. Around the room, the air seemed to shift. Staffers on both sides of the aisle exchanged quick glances. A few reporters in the press row straightened in their seats, pens poised. No one knew what was inside that folder, but the weight of it felt undeniable, as if it contained the fuse to an explosion everyone could feel, but no one could yet see. And Jasmine didn't open it. Not yet. She let her hand rest there, calm and steady, as if she had all the time in the world. It wasn't hesitation, it was control. Control over herself, over the moment, over the tension now creeping into every corner of the chamber. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. The image of Jasmine's hand resting on the folder faded in the viewers' minds, replaced by a flashback, one that explained why she was so calm in the face of Melania's very public insult. It had started weeks earlier in a quiet corner of her DC office, long after the building had emptied out for the night. The blinds were drawn, the glow from her desk lamp the only light in the room. Her phone buzzed once, an unknown number. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something in her gut told her to pick up. A low, careful voice came through the line. "You don't know me," the caller began, "but I have something you need to hear." The sound of a file being played over the phone was grainy, but the voice on it was unmistakable. Melania Trump. And then came the words, cold, detached. Who cares about the children? Jasmine didn't move, didn't speak. She just let the sentence loop in her mind, burning itself into memory. In the weeks that followed, she moved like a chess player, thinking 5 moves ahead. She verified the recording, checked the timestamp, confirmed the chain of custody. Quiet meetings with trusted staff, legal counsel, and one investigative journalist ensured that when this moment came, it wouldn't be dismissed as rumor or spin. She didn't want to use it recklessly. Evidence like this was a blade, powerful but dangerous if swung without precision. She waited, watching, weighing when it would cut the deepest. And when Melania's unfit remark landed in the hearing room, Jasmine knew the time had come. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't reach for the microphone. She didn't even blink. Instead, she let the words hang in the air, heavy and unchallenged. Every second she stayed silent was another second for Melania to believe she had landed the perfect blow. The former First Lady's chin lifted slightly, her posture relaxing in that subtle, self-satisfied way of someone who thinks the room now belongs to them. The cameras, hungry for reaction shots, zoomed in on Jasmine's face, expecting anger, maybe even outrage. But what they found was stillness. Not the stillness of defeat, but the kind that makes you uneasy because you can't read it. Her eyes stayed locked on Melania, unblinking, steady, like she was studying the exact moment when a mask begins to crack. In the press row, a reporter whispered, "Is she not going to answer?" The question was swallowed quickly by the hum of anticipation. Jasmine knew silence was its own kind of weapon. It unsettled. It made people overplay their hand. And in that moment, she wanted Melania comfortable enough to think the fight was over before it had even begun. So she waited. 10 seconds. 15. Long enough for the tension to coil tighter, for the entire chamber to lean forward without realizing it. Long enough for the moment to become hers. The room held its breath as Jasmine's fingers hovered over the laptop's trackpad. With deliberate calm, she pressed play. A faint static crackled through the speakers, the kind of low hum that immediately draws your attention, signaling that what's coming isn't just noise but a message. Then Melania's voice came through, unmistakable and clear, cutting through the charged silence like a sharp blade. Who cares about the children? The words hung in the air, chilling and cold, stripped of any pretense or softening. It was a voice unguarded, raw and damning. Every ear in the chamber tuned in, every eye locked on Jasmine and the laptop screen. The camera zoomed in tight, capturing every flicker of reaction, Melania's slight frown, the tightening of her jaw, the flicker of nerves beneath her composed exterior. For a long moment, no one dared to speak. The phrase echoed in the silence, reverberating not just through the room, but across millions of screens and minds nationwide. The moment the recording played, the room erupted not with noise, but with stunned silence. Reporters froze mid-sentence, their pens hovering over notebooks, eyes wide with disbelief. Phones instantly came alive, capturing the clip, slicing it into fragments that would soon flood the internet. Across the country, 40 million viewers were glued to their screens watching live as a simple phrase tore through the carefully crafted image of a former First Lady. Twitter exploded. The hashtag #WhoCares blazed across timelines, trending within minutes, fueling fiery debates, memes, and outrage. The clip was shared and reshared, dissected and discussed. What was meant to be a private moment recorded years earlier had become a national flashpoint. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was a raw, emotional reckoning with a truth many had suspected but never heard so plainly. Inside the hearing room, the stunned faces of those present mirrored the millions reacting online, disbelief, anger, and a sense that nothing would ever be the same again. Melania's carefully crafted calm began to crack almost imperceptibly at first. Her lips pressed into a thin line, a practiced smile slipping away like a shadow at dusk. Her hands clenched beneath the table, fingers tightening around an invisible anchor, as if to hold herself steady amid the storm. Her eyes darted away, refusing to meet Jasmine's unblinking gaze or the cameras now trained relentlessly on her. The silence stretched long and heavy, filled with everything she didn't say, guilt, fear, and the weight of a truth now impossible to deny. Behind that poised exterior, the tension was palpable. Every breath she took seemed measured, calculated, a desperate attempt to reclaim control she was rapidly losing. But the damage was done. The recording had landed like a hammer, shattering the polished fade and leaving her exposed in front of millions. Around the chamber, the quiet murmurs grew louder. Reporters exchanged glances, sensing the shift. Even Melania's allies shifted uncomfortably, their confident composure faltering under the pressure of the moment. The First Lady, who once commanded the room with elegance, now seemed small, vulnerable, and trapped by the very words she wished had never escaped. Days after the hearing, Jasmine's phone buzzed quietly on her desk, an unknown number flashing on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. A cautious, tired voice came through, hesitant but desperate to be heard. "I used to work at the border detention center," the caller said softly. "What I saw, it's not what they show the cameras." The volunteer's words painted a grim picture, trays of spoiled milk and rotten yogurt handed to children too weak to refuse. Thin, crinkled foil blankets barely shielding shivering bodies from the cold concrete floors. The harsh scent of disinfectant mixing with something sour and stale that no child should have to endure. The caller described children huddled in corners, knees pulled tight, eyes wide, and empty eyes that told stories no sound could capture. Moments when a child reached out only to be brushed away in a blur of hurried footsteps and indifferent voices. Jasmine listened, absorbing every detail like a wound opening and healing at the same time. This was the truth behind the photo, the story no PR team wanted released. And now this truth was coming straight to her, unfiltered, raw, and impossible to ignore. A package arrived at Jasmine's office a few days later, a worn manila envelope thick with glossy prints. The first image stopped her cold. Melania Trump, radiant in a designer white dress, smiled brightly for the cameras outside the detention center. The setting was pristine, blooming flowers, freshly swept pavement, warm sunlight framing her like a magazine cover. It was a picture-perfect moment designed to inspire compassion and confidence. But the next photo hit like a gut punch. Inside the very same facility, children lay huddled on cold concrete floors, wrapped in crinkled foil blankets that looked more like trash than bedding. Some sat against stained walls, knees drawn tightly to their chests, eyes hollow from weeks of confinement. The fluorescent lights flickered harshly above, casting stark shadows on weary faces. The stark contrast between these two images was a brutal truth no one could ignore. The smiling First Lady bathed in sunlight and adoration, and the forgotten children left in cold, harsh conditions, barely fit for animals. Jasmine studied every detail, the wear on the walls, the chipped paint, the row of tiny worn shoes lined by the door. She could almost smell the stale air and the sharp sting of disinfectant. The photos weren't just evidence, they were a call to action, a vivid mirror reflecting a reality America had tried to look away from for too long. The moment the photos and recordings surfaced, the media frenzy was unstoppable. Major news outlets from CNN to Fox News, MSNBC to the New York Times all jumped on the story with breaking headlines and continuous coverage. Newsrooms lit up with urgency, producers scrambling to slot the explosive material into every newscast and online article. Social media platforms became battlegrounds. Twitter timelines flooded with hashtag Who Cares and hashtag Border Truth Facebook pages exploded with viral shares, and Instagram stories brimmed with passionate calls for justice. The public outcry grew louder by the hour, fueling protests in town halls. Political pressure mounted on lawmakers who had previously ignored or downplayed the border crisis. The story wasn't just a scandal anymore. It had become a national movement demanding accountability. In every corner of America, people were talking, sharing, debating. And at the heart of it all was Jasmine Crockett, who had transformed from a lone voice in the chamber to a symbol of truth in the media storm. The storm that had engulfed the nation forced an unprecedented response. Melania Trump was officially summoned back to testify in a special congressional hearing. This time, the stakes were higher and the spotlight was unforgiving. Reporters lined the hallways hours before the session, microphones poised to capture every word. The Capitol was electric with anticipation. Everyone knew this was more than politics. It was a reckoning. At the center of the hearing sat Jasmine Crockett, now entrusted with leading the questioning. Papers neatly stacked, notes highlighted, evidence meticulously cross-referenced. She carried the weight of the truth like armor. As Melania entered the room, the confident ease she once displayed was replaced by a guarded tension. The white suit was gone, replaced by a muted gray ensemble that seemed to reflect the shift in tone. The gavel fell. The committee chair's voice echoed, "Mrs. Trump, you are called to answer questions regarding the recording and evidence presented. Congresswoman Crockett, you have the floor." With cameras locked in, Jasmine leaned forward, a voice steady but edged with steel, ready to pierce the veil of silence and demand accountability. Melania's eyes briefly scanned the packed hearing room, then fixed on the microphone with a steady, rehearsed calm. Her voice was cool, deliberate, carefully measured to convey control, despite the swirling storm of controversy surrounding her. "I categorically deny ever uttering the phrase, 'Who cares about the children?'" she declared with unwavering conviction, her words crisp and definitive. This wasn't just a casual denial. It was a carefully crafted statement, honed and polished by her legal team and PR advisors. Each syllable was meant to reassure allies, sway skeptics, and put an end to the rising tide of outrage. To the casual listener, it sounded like the closing of a chapter, a firm attempt to bury the scandal before it could do more damage. But the room held its breath. The silence that followed wasn't a sign of belief, it was heavy with suspicion and tension. Reporters exchanged subtle glances, their pens poised, but momentarily still. Even some of Melania's staunchest supporters seemed to tighten their grip on their notes, their faces betraying the strain of the moment. Across the table, Jasmine's eyes never wavered. Her posture remained calm but unmistakably alert, the look of someone who knew this denial was a mask, a last-ditch effort to deflect what was coming. She understood the stakes had never been higher. This was the pivotal moment, the hinge on which the entire hearing could turn. Slowly, deliberately, Jasmine leaned forward, folding her hands over the folder in front of her, the folder that held the undeniable proof. The air in the chamber grew thicker, the tension palpable. It was clear the fight was far from over, and Jasmine was ready to deliver a response that no denial could erase. Jasmine's fingers moved with steady certainty as she reached for the laptop again. The room seemed to contract, every pair of eyes locked on her hands, the hands that held the power to shatter a carefully constructed lie. With a deliberate click, the original recording filled the speakers. Melania's voice came through clear, unmistakable, colder and more dismissive than before. "Who cares about the children?" But it wasn't just the words that struck everyone silent. Right after, a soft, contemptuous laugh echoed sharp and cutting like a dagger slicing through the veneer of innocence. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Breaths caught, pens stopped moving. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy with the weight of truth, raw, undeniable, and impossible to refute. Melania's face lost the last traces of composure. Her eyes flickered, her jaw tightened, and for the first time she seemed genuinely exposed under the harsh glare of the cameras and the unyielding reality of the recording. Around the room, the stunned expressions mirrored the shockwaves rippling through millions watching live. This wasn't just a political attack anymore. It was a moment that would define reputations and alter lives. The moment the knockout evidence hit the airwaves, Melania's team swung into action. Within hours, a high-profile attorney known for his aggressive tactics and headline-grabbing courtroom showdowns was retained to manage the fallout. A polished press release soon followed, painting Jasmine Crockett as a reckless opportunist fabricating claims and weaponizing private conversations for political gain. The language was sharp and strategic, designed to sow doubt and shift the narrative away from the damning evidence. The statement accused Jasmine of malicious intent and warned of legal consequences should she refuse to retract her claims and apologize publicly. It was a clear signal this was no longer just a political skirmish. It was a battle that would be fought in courtrooms as much as on television screens. Meanwhile, Melania appeared on primetime news interviews, carefully delivering rehearsed rebuttals wrapped in the language of dignity and victimhood. Her team worked tirelessly to control the story, pushing back against the viral outrage with a steady stream of sound bites, carefully curated appearances, and sympathetic messaging. But for Jasmine, the legal threats were just another challenge, one she was ready to meet head-on. Jasmine sat calmly in her office, surrounded by stacks of evidence recordings, photos, witness statements, all painstakingly verified and ready to be unleashed. She knew the legal threats and PR spin were designed to intimidate, to fracture her resolve. But there was no turning back. The truth was bigger than politics, bigger than fear. With a determined breath, she gave the order, "Release everything." Within hours, encrypted files containing the full unedited recordings, graphic photos, and sworn affidavits were sent to major news outlets nationwide. There would be no more clips, no more teases. The entire story in all its raw, unfiltered reality was now public. The impact was immediate and explosive. News sites crashed under surging traffic, cable networks interrupted programming, and social media erupted into a frenzy. The truth was no longer just a whisper in a hearing room. It was a thunderous roar across the country. Jasmine watched the storm unfold with a steady gaze, knowing this was a turning point not just for the hearing, but for justice itself. The fallout from Jasmine's full disclosure was swift and unrelenting. Brands that once proudly flaunted Melania's image on billboards and glossy ads began to quietly pull back. Luxury sponsors canceled planned endorsements, charity events listed under her name were suddenly removed from calendars. Even the fashion world shifted, invitations to high-profile galas and runway shows stopped arriving. Stylists who once competed to dress her now avoided her calls. International media outlets picked up the story with fervor, amplifying the scandal across borders and languages. Headlines ran in multiple countries, turning what began as a domestic political controversy into a global reckoning. Within weeks, the carefully crafted aura of glamour and influence that had shielded Melania began to crumble. The silence from her camp was deafening, a stark contrast to the media storm she once commanded. For Jasmine, the ripple effects were a sign that the truth was finally breaking through layers of protection and that the battle had entered a new, more dangerous phase. The aftermath of the battle was not just headlines or political shifts, it was deeply personal. Across airports, church halls, and bustling bus stations, families torn apart by the border crisis were finally coming back together. Tears flowed freely as children, some taller now, some learning a new language, ran into the arms of parents they hadn't seen in months or even years. The shock of separation slowly melted away, replaced by the warmth of a reunion long overdue. In those moments, raw, messy, and beautiful, the human cost of the fight became undeniable. The faces in the crowd weren't just statistics. They were stories of hope, resilience, and love prevailing against the harshest odds. Every embrace was a testament to the power of truth and the courage it took to bring it to light. For Jasmine, witnessing these reunions was the real victory, a reminder that behind every political battle lies the heartbeat of humanity. The firestorm of truth ignited more than just outrage, it sparked change. In the weeks following the revelations, lawmakers pushed through new legislation aimed at protecting vulnerable children at the border. Independent oversight committees were established, tasked with monitoring detention centers and ensuring humane treatment. No longer could these facilities operate in the shadows, hidden from public scrutiny. Communities across the nation rallied together, offering support to immigrant children and families, from legal aid and education to food, shelter, and emotional care. Grassroots organizations blossomed, fueled by the awareness Jasmine's fight had ignited. The battle was far from over, but the path forward was clearer. The nation had been forced to reckon with its conscience, and with vigilance and collective effort, the hope for justice and dignity had been renewed. Jasmine stood before a sea of faces, mothers, veterans, teachers, and children whose lives had been touched by the fight for justice. The applause crashed like waves, but she held up a hand calling for silence. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady but filled with raw emotion. "Truth isn't just what we say, it's what we fight for, even when it shakes the ground beneath us." Her eyes swept the crowd, meeting countless pairs of hopeful eyes. This fight is far from over, but every voice raised, every story shared brings us closer to a world where justice isn't a luxury, it's a right. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "And now I ask you, if it were you, what would you stand up for?" The room fell into thoughtful silence, hearts pounding with the unspoken challenge. This story reminds us that truth is not just something we speak, it's something we must stand for, especially when it's hard and uncomfortable. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to face it head-on for what's right. Whether in politics or everyday life, standing up against injustice can spark change that echoes far beyond ourselves. If this story moved, you don't keep it to yourself. Like, share and subscribe to Mr. Fact Story, where every voice matters and every truth counts. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world.